The smooth jazz hooted mournfully into the subway car as we rolled into the night. Out the window I could see people celebrating the new year, drinking themselves into oblivion in a desperate hope to convince themselves that the hope and promise they saw might actually be real diamonds and not the cut glass of a $2 streetwalker. The PDA had two options for me. One was some industrial espionage from some guy named Gessler, and the other was from the broad Collins, who still didn't know where the shift key was on her PDA. Somehow she got a second call out despite being in jail. I wasn't going to ask how she'd managed that, and I figured I didn't need to know. Decided to go with Gessler for the moment. Alternate contacts were always good to have. Problem was, he was the CEO of Intex, and yeah, that was the firm that Rook had got into competition with. Gessler seemed like a pretty straight kind of guy, or at least too arrogant and confident to bother with basic manners. Decided to match him myself. Turned out he needed someone serious. Serious enough not to bother desecrating classic comedy, that was for sure. As a pulmonary edema, well, few drugs, decent medical care, you'll survive one of those. Wasn't sure I'd survive stealing from Rook, but, well, she needed to keep better lids on her secrets. Needed to know where the prototype was, though, and it turned out that it was at a firm called TX Fabrications. I knew them. They did most of the manufacturing in the city. They were also the most stolen from firm in the city. Probably a coincidence. Whoever that security was, they weren't paying them enough. Belsize Way was the target, and all I had to do was break in, deal with a couple of heavily armed enforcer guards, and retrieve the info from a locked and sealed basement. Switching into crosslink mode gave me a few problems. There was a wire jack on the first floor, but a guard looking right at it. In order to get into the basement, I'd have to get to that point without being seen, or more to the point, shot. The first patrolling guard I could distract easily enough. He had a trapdoor underneath that he was walking over. Simple enough matter to rewire the light switch, and then wait for him to come by again. While he mashed his face onto the floor below me, I found myself wondering whether or not the $300 take-home he was on was worth it. I decided it probably wasn't, but it doubtless kept him in exercise gear. The next problem was going to be the guard above me. Taking the elevator up would distract him with the ping, and I could then take it straight back down and hope he wasn't going to check it quickly enough. While his back was turned, it was easy enough to take the stairwell, and then wire jack the blue circuits. That gave me the access I needed with the crosslink, and in safety I could easily work things from there. It was simple enough to switch the light switches around, and I could use that to distract him in front of the red socket, but I still had to get back down there for the moment. The problem then was simple enough, how to get back to the red socket, and I decided the quickest way to do it was basically going to be to step in front of a camera. The crosslink wouldn't let me set the camera to both of areas at once, so I had to improvise a little. Taking the stairs down would bring me into the camera's field and trigger whatever I crosslink the camera to, so I opted to go in this case for the trapdoor leading to the server. Popping down the stairs triggered the camera and allowed me to drop down rapidly. I actually landed on my feet for once, and then drop into crosslink mode again let me open the server door and hack it. I had the data which gave me a way out. I could leave any time I wanted, but Gessler had specified that he didn't want any witnesses left, and well, this seemed like as good a way as any of fixing that little problem. A flick of the light switch woke the guard up and got him moving. Then it was a simple enough deal to just rewire it and pop out, before waiting for the trap to seal again. Unfortunately for the mook, he wasn't being paid enough to notice the shocker in front of him, or indeed a couple of other buzzers that he got just as a precaution. It might have just been vindictive to take the guard out. I mean, he was only being paid a basic salary, but I wanted to look at this laptop. Yeah, we're not making anything from Rook. We would... so stop people. Kill it. Right. Turns out Kelly Ackland, presumably some dame working for TX Industries, was denying making anything from Rook. Of course, that was just evidence that she was concealing it, and as I headed into the night, I walked on. The voice at the back of my head witnessed my actions. It gave me a ghost rating and even came up an achievement. Turned out the fabrication prototype was at a fab facility on Lyle. And guess what? Gessler wanted me to go, but not immediately. Easy enough to end the call. Unfortunately, Rook now knew I'd been taking contracts with Intex, so that left me kind of in the deep end. I decided to go and see Collins first. I didn't really want to get in touch with the redhead again. Minimal violence was the objective here. And well, if we could get Mark Jackson into the frame, it got Collins out of it. Intex base all their dirty ops out of the office on Marlow Street. Break in there, grab the options, and get the dame's gratitude, because that could never end badly. The server itself was on the first floor, easy enough to do, but the dame had specified minimum violence. So, a jump took me up to start with. Problem was, the guard was easy enough to wipe out from the front. But the minimum violence achievement meant I had to be a little more creative. And in this case it was going to be a case of disabling the lights and then very quickly dropping down to get past him. There was also the guard on the second floor I had to worry about, but I'd deal with him in a second. I primed the jump trousers and then hit the switch, before realising I couldn't actually do both at once. A rapid bit of manoeuvring got me up the stairs before the guard could turn his back, and I hoped he would have noticed the wire jack that was right in front of him. Luckily for me, he didn't, which left me with my problems on the first floor. One guard, a couple of other dudes, and more to the point, a red locked door that I had to deal with, which meant getting back downstairs. That in itself posed problems, but it wasn't anything I couldn't tackle. And in fact, an even better option was probably going to be to try to jam the guard into the other section, knock him out. After all, the dame had specified no violence. Now all I had to do was find out if he'd be smart enough to use the hand scanner and open the door. Turned out he wasn't, and I thanked my lucky stars for guards on cheap pay packets. Fortunately, these guys were too cheap to pay their guards to do proper attention getting, so it was easy enough to open the door to the laptop and then give myself access. Turns out Gessler's employees were a little bit mutinous. They'd muzzled into East Point into a gun market the same year all handguns were banned. And as he pointed out, the market didn't exist, so I got the impression Gessler was running a long-term op. Maybe he had something up his sleeve, maybe he didn't. In any event, I didn't know, I didn't care. I had to get this guard moving to open the wire jack. And then to complicate things, it also turned out I had to trigger the camera outside to get the server door open. There were several words that came to mind. None of them would get me any favours with the dame, so I didn't bother using them. The key stage at this point was to flick the switch and get the guard to open the door. And then hope for the best. Re-rigging the lights forced the guard to open the door, and he realised then that it wouldn't work. Which was easy enough. Now he was on patrol, and hopefully he wouldn't spot me as I worked my way in and wirejacked the connection. Another jump onto the door gave me access to the yellow circuit, and I wormed my way back out of the building. Cross-linking again, I opened the rear door. That got me access to the internal camera, and then I realised that I hadn't actually bothered to jack it anyway. Set the connection, open the server. Simple. Just as simple as rigging things to track the other guard. The Dame had specified no killing. I think I'd mentioned that a few times. So with him shut in the office and mysteriously locked away, I hoped someone had the sense to work out what had happened and get him clear before he either starved or drowned. Although how you drown in an office like that is beyond me. It didn't matter. The guards had gone, there had been no violence, and the server was nicely sealed. I'd been a perfect gentleman, and the Dame would hopefully be suitably grateful when I got her out. The call had gone, but the server logs showed it was downloaded by a Rook IP. The plot had thickened. Maybe it was Jackson, maybe it wasn't. Unfortunately, she hung up before I could give her the numbers. Conway wanted to get in touch at this point, but I wanted to stop by and get a few bits and pieces first, most notably the charge meter upgrade, and then stop by the glass. Several of these upgrades looked like good ideas. The Hush Cracker in particular looked like an excellent one for getting through windows. But I decided to go for the drop shot, if only to let my dignity stop taking any more beatings. Time was up. I had to go face the music with a Rook. She knew I'd been taking missions on the side from her rival. The question was whether I needed to be honest with her. She knew I'd taken the job to steal one of her prototypes. And to be honest, well, that was what honesty got you. As he pointed out, the prototype doesn't exist, and that's going to make the mission to retrieve it a bit trickier. Turns out she wanted me to double-cross Gessler. Steal something with a tracker on it, and, well, that could be problematic. So that I can give it to you, so I can see if this was getting way too tangling. I love this job. Aren't you afraid I'll tell Gessler? Exactly. From who did she want me to steal from? Who wanted to bet it was going to be Gessler? Turned out it wasn't. It was TX Fabrications that were going to get hit. This city. She gave me the address, 39 London Road. Were there any special requests? Well, minimum violence. Ironically enough, for a dame with a medical degree, a firearms company, and a nasty streak of vengeance, she seemed to have a thing about not killing people. I suppose that's what made the difference between Intex and Rook Firearms. A quick scan gave me some options. The first one was obviously that there was no obvious way in. The red buildings were easy enough, but they were sealed. I'd have to set the cross-link to trigger one of the outer doors when the guard walked through it, and then initiate a wirejack onto all three circuits. With that done, it was easy enough to work my way back out, and then realise that actually he hadn't given me an in to the rest of the building. I decided to set up the other red doors to open while I was at it, and use the loop to open them for me. Easy enough then to just break the circuit and nullify the connection, or so I'd hoped. Turned out it wasn't that simple. So I came up with a little ruse, the old Shanghai loop, which did absolutely nothing. The hand scanners were neutralised. All I had to do then was wait for one of the guards to walk in, set it up, and wait for guard number 2 to wander into somewhere he shouldn't be and seal it up. The timing was going to be awkward though. I had to reset the door quickly so that the first guard was sealed, and then break the loop again. With one guard trapped and walking through the green sensor, I could get some of the other doors open. And as it turned out, that was exactly what I needed to do. This was turning into an exercise in timing, but if I got it right, I'd be able to simply bait all the guards into the tracking. Green door open, and circuit link unfortunately not broken fast enough. I needed to find a way of doing that quickly. It turned out that set off an alarm beacon on the prototype. So of course now all the guards were trying. That gave me a way in, of course. I could use this switch there to trigger it and open the outer door. Like so. The hatch was now open and that gave me a way into the building, except of course it didn't. I need to keep that connection permanently in place or the guard would see a problem. What mattered now was working my way into the building. It was a simple matter of waiting for the first prototype to open out, but that wasn't going to be the issue. The issue was going to be the fact that the guards could see me. As the bullets tore their way into my body, I found myself praying to the great god Murphy. Either he was feeling merciful or he was just in the mood to watch me suffer, because I got an option to reload my autosave. Should be simple enough. First guard opens, and smashing through the glass gives me all the options I need. Turns out all of these plate glass windows were primary triggers. My weight hitting them would smash them open and give me a way to take out the guards discreetly. If I could find a way to neutralise those guards. This suited me just fine. I had both the enforcers locked down quite nicely. All it made now was to wait for the final trip to open and for things to work. Unfortunately, the other mook was walking too often into the trip, so I decided to shut him into place. it was still proving problematic shutting down archers from the system. I couldn't easily control where or not I cross-linked something out. Then I figured out how to actually work the interface and things got a lot simpler. I left-click cancelled the link. All I had to do then was wait for the trap, set it, and get ready to slam the door shut on the loop. That was pretty much all the security mooks cleared, except I then realised my mistake. I needed at least one of them wake open enough to trigger the outer doors. That, as it turned out, wasn't a good way to solve the problem. Then I found myself wondering what on earth I got that achievement for. Turned out I'd accidentally slapped a guard in half. Bit problematic since I now needed a way of getting the door open. And in fact I didn't think this was going to be possible. With the upper trapdoor sealed, there was no way this was going to work. And that got me to a restart. With wirejacks in place on all three systems, I started considering my options. The first, of course, was that I was still stuck inside the building. Not a good position to be in. Luckily, the mook walked back, and that gave me the option to open the door, and more to the point, to disconnect all the hand scanners from the doors. As before, it was simple enough to rig everything to open correctly. I just had to find a way of disabling the various guards. And in this case, it meant correctly sealing up this open yellow door to get Mr. Happy out of the way. With the door open, I broke the seal on the crosslink, and that left a yellow in position. Now was to summon Purple out and get him starting his patrol before getting on to matters more delicate. Summoning the alarm would easily call in this Goomba, and that gave me the option I needed to open the door. Once the alarm triggered, that was him done. And with the point, the door open. All that remained now was to find a way in. All the guards were patrolling and active at this point, so I needed to get them back out of the way. Opening red was easy enough, and that would let me quickly seal in one of the enforcers by breaking the link. If I remember to seal it in time, which I wouldn't. Cursing my mistake, I carried on. I had to wait for the guards to reset their patrols and wander back into the correct position for the trap, but luckily that wouldn't take long. The first guard hit his beat, turned round, walked through the detector, and boom, that was his mate nicely sealed up and caged like a good little guard dog. A similar plan would get rid of the next guard, giving me the two middle floors secure. The problem was always going to be the third option. More to the point, it was going to require careful timing to properly lock a guard into place and seal the area up. With the two enforcers sealed and dealt with, it was now a simple matter of getting into position on the trapdoor and waiting for it to open. I'd have to land on both. I'd have to take down at least one guard on the way down, and then drop onto the other, which wasn't necessarily the easiest job in the world, but it had to be done. I double-checked the crosslink. Wasn't sure how well this was going to work, but I figured I could take at least one guard out before he saw me. I figured the great gods would owed me some favours. Either that or they were just short on bourbon and needed a laugh. Luckily one of the guards had heard me, but I'd had the luck to disconnect the hand scanner. He wasn't doing anything and I had the matter dealt with properly now. At this point all I had to do was disconnect one of the hands, disconnect yellow so he could call for help on the prototype. Easy enough thing to do. I rigged the arch to the door. The way I figured it, the enforcer had walked through it enough times that there wouldn't be an issue. Of course I'd have to let the lower guard out again to get him through, but that was a problem for later. I broke the link just for a second, and then realised that Mr. Purple was unconscious again. Didn't matter this time though, I was inside the building and out of my initial problem. I checked the stairwells down, broke the link on the purple arch, and it was easy enough to jack the prototype. But Rook had said she wanted the laptop as well, and that was another issue to deal with, because frankly, it was inside the third floor, right by a heavily armed and armed enforcer who I figured wasn't going to be in the mood for asking questions like, "Who are you?" when he could get that out of my cooling corpse. He'd be easy enough to distract, of course, but I'd have to move quick. At this point I figured the quickest way to do it was going to be some mindless violence. Turned out Rook didn't necessarily disagree, but hey, she wasn't the one running the policy here. The door was opening and shutting, but the two guards were too neatly in phase with each other. I figured this guard would have to be getting really annoyed by now. Probably figured somebody was pranking him. And let's face it, he'd be right, except the prank had a slightly deadlier feel to it. And in fact the two guards were precisely in sync, so I'd have to time this carefully and break the crosslink once the door was open. I'd also need to break the secondary crosslink as well, but with that done, it'd be easy enough to go in, grab the laptop, and anyway, turns out Gessler and Ackland were still having their argument. With that done, I got back out of the way. It was time to reset the little lockdown trap and let Mr. Enforcer go and sleep off for the rest of the night. That was easily done. All that remained was to drop the last guard, and more to the point, get myself a way out of the building. This was going to be easy enough. Disable one of the guards, Unfortunately, the no violence rule was still in effect, so I needed a way of doing it discreetly. I had wondered if I could simply take a flying leap through 3 levels of plate glass and out through the trapdoor, but decided against it. I probably did have enough power in the bullfrog suits, but the noise level would be immense. That said, it had a certain style to it that I couldn't really resist. So I wired up the crosslink and decided to give it a go. This should be easy enough. Wait for the guard to turn his back, then just run over, power up the boots, and go for it. The timing something told me it wasn't going to be nearly that easy. And indeed it wasn't. In fact, it almost got me killed when one of the other guards noticed the noise and decided to check out the mysterious plate glass window smashing. With both enforcers now thoroughly confused as to what the hell was going on, I decided to check and realised I didn't have the range of the bullfrog. I was going to have to use the light switch on the first floor again, and that had problems all its own, namely the patrolling boom bar. I cross-linked the lights and the hatches together. With luck, I'd only have to hit one button to make this work. Of course, I might have to end up hitting one guard to make it work as well, but that was by the by. It didn't really matter. I took the lift, hit the switch, and ran like hell. Then I fell off the ledge. Still, at least I knew the first part of the plan worked. As I made my way up and massaged some feeling back into my ankles, I got ready to try again. This should be a simple plan. It really should. And it was. The jump took me out over the subway, and it was easy enough to run away from there. Too much noise, too much time, but hey, no violence and no witnesses. TXF were going to have a lot of explanation as to how one of their prototypes had gone missing, but hey, their insurance practically paid out without asking any questions for this stuff. What the hell was it? An electric accelerator. Drop it into a trash can at Union, they pick it up, plant the tracker, and that was a simple enough job. That left me working with Gessler and Collins again, but I figured, hey, the Bourbon was calling, and it was time to hit the sack.